Hey guys, tonight we creep through the creaky oak door of a medieval bedchamber, where rushlights sputter, and the air smells of straw and wood smoke. Picture yourself standing on a cold stone floor, a woolen blanket draped over your shoulders, as shadows dance across a lumpy straw mattress. This isn't just any room, it's where medieval folk, from peasants to nobles, navigated the messy, mysterious world of sex, love, and desire, all under the church's watchful eye. You're about to uncover what really happened when the candles dimmed, and trust me, you probably wouldn't survive the flea-infested bedding, let alone the rules. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your city and local time. I love knowing where you're drifting off from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're in this chamber, and the first thing that hits you is the weight of the air, roughly the 5th to 15th centuries. A time when life was short, winters were brutal, and the church was basically your nosy landlord. Sex in medieval Europe wasn't a casual fling or a rom-com subplot. It was a battlefield of duty, sin, and survival. Whether you're a farmer's daughter in a muddy village or a lady in a drafty castle, your bedroom was less about passion and more about rules set by priests, parents, and the ever-looming threat of gossip. But don't think it was all joyless. People found ways to steal moments of desire, even if they had to whisper it behind tapestries. Let's set the scene with a mainstream fact. The medieval church controlled sexual behavior, like a micromanaging boss. Theologians like Saint Augustine, in the 5th century, preached that sex was only for procreation within marriage, and anything else, lust, pleasure, or stepping out, was a fast track to hell. You're supposed to save your energy for prayer, not sneaky rendezvous, and the church's rules were drilled into you through sermons and confession. If you're lying on that straw mattress, you're probably worrying about eternal flames more than sweet nothings. But humans are humans, and medieval folks weren't exactly chanting psalms all night. Now, here's a quirky tidbit. Some medieval beds had bed curtains not just for warmth but for privacy, even in crowded homes. Imagine you're sharing a one-room cottage with your parents, siblings, and a stray chicken. Those curtains were your only shot at a private moment with your spouse. They were like the medieval version of a do not disturb sign. Though good luck keeping the chicken out. Couples rigged up these heavy wool drapes to carve out a tiny bubble of intimacy. And you're tugging one shut now, hoping it muffles any awkward sounds from that lumpy mattress. But not everyone agrees on how strict things really were. Historians still argue whether the church's rules crushed all fun, or if people quietly ignored them. Some point to court records showing folks fined for fornication, suggesting plenty broke the rules. Others, reading bawdy tales like Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, say medieval life had a cheeky side, with couples sneaking off to haylofts or nobles flirting in castle halls. You're starting to suspect this chamber's seen more than just sleep, but you're also feeling the church's shadow, like a judgmental ant hovering nearby. Step closer to the bed and notice the details. The rough hemp sheets, the faint whiff of damp straw, the way the rushlight's flame sputters like it's gossiping. This isn't a cozy love nest, it's a practical space where sex was often less about romance and more about survival. If you're a peasant, you're hoping for kids to work the fields. If you're a noble, you're under pressure to produce an heir before your rival cousin snags the title. Either way, desire's tangled up with duty, and you're learning fast that intimacy comes with strings attached. Plus, let's be real, that straw's poking through the mattress, And your already itching medieval romance wasn't exactly candlelit dinners. Time for a quick joke. Why did the medieval couple share a bed? Because it was the only place. Warmer than the fireplace. Seriously, though. Huddling under those blankets was as much about surviving the cold as it was about anything else. You're pulling that woolen cover tighter, wondering how anyone found the mood with frost on the walls. As you settle into this world, you're noticing the contradictions. The church says no fun, but the songs and stories you've heard, think minstrels strumming about lovers in gardens, hint at a sparkier side. You're a woman, maybe 20, and whether you're betrothed to a stranger or eyeing the blacksmith's son, you're navigating a maze of expectations. Sex is your duty, but it's also a mystery, and nobody's giving you a handbook. You're picking up scraps of knowledge from older sisters, body jokes, or maybe a cheeky nun who bends the rules. It's a lot, and you're just trying to keep your head above water, or at least above that scratchy straw. Another chuckle. Ever wonder why medieval beds were so short? Because they figured you'd be too busy sinning to stretch out. Okay, maybe it was just bad carpentry, but you're eyeing this tiny bed like it's a torture device. You're starting to see this chamber as a stage, where every choice, who you love, how you love, if you love carries weight. Some followed the church to the letter, others snuck round, and you're curious about both. For now, you're just settling in, the rushlights glow softening the room, ready to peel back more layers of this hidden, human world. One last joke before we move on. Why did the medieval candle burn out so fast? It couldn't handle the bedroom's secrets. As you glance around, you're ready to step deeper into this era, carrying the hum of desire and defiance that flickered even in the darkest corners of medieval life. You're stepping out of that dimly lit bedchamber, the straw's itch still clinging to your thoughts, and into the cold stone nave of a medieval church, where the air smells of damp earth and frankincense. The flicker of votive candles casts shadows on towering arches, and you're a medieval woman, maybe 21, kneeling on a worn pew, your rough wool dress scratching your knees. The priest's voice booms from the pulpit, preaching about sin, and you're feeling the church's iron grip tighten around your heart, especially when it comes to what happens back in that bedroom. This is the medieval church, the ultimate rule maker for sex and desire, and you're navigating its maze of guilt, fear, and just a hint of defiance, all while trying not to fidget during the sermon. The mainstream fact is that the Catholic Church dominated medieval life, setting strict rules for sexual behavior across Europe from the 5th to 15th centuries. Theologians like Thomas Aquinas in the 13th century laid it out. Sex was only allowed within marriage, for making babies, and even then, you'd better not enjoy it too much. Pleasure was suspect, and anything outside the rules, adultery, premarital, flings, or even spicy thoughts, was a sin you'd confess in a sweaty panic. You're clutching a wooden rosary, half listening to the priest warn about hellfire, and wondering if last night's daydream about the miller's son counts as mortal, or just venial. The church didn't just control your body, it owned your soul, and it wasn't shy about reminding you. But here's a quirky tidbit. Some priests handed out penance tokens, little lead coins you'd get after confessing your sins, like a medieval hall pass for forgiveness. In the 14th century, folks caught fornicating might carry these to prove they'd atoned, flashing them at church to dodge gossip. You're picturing slipping one into your pocket, maybe for sneaking a kiss behind the barn, and grinning at the idea of a coin for your crush. It's like getting a gold star for bad behavior, but your still nervous confession means spilling your secrets to a priest who might know your dad, Historians still argue whether the church's rules were a straitjacket or if people found wiggle room. Some point to penitential manuals, which detailed punishments for every sin, suggesting the church expected you to slip up. Others, reading tavern songs or court records, say folks laughed off the rules, sneaking into haylofts or flirting at festivals. You're kneeling here, feeling the weight of those sermons but also the tug of human nature, wondering how anyone kept it all straight. Time for a quick joke. Why did the medieval priest carry a big book to list all the sins you forgot to confess? Seriously, those manuals were like sin encyclopedias, and you're half tempted to peek at one, just to see what's on the naughty list. For now, you're keeping your head down, the rosary beads clicking softly. Picture the scene. The church is packed, with villagers in rough tunics and a few nobles in velvet, all pretending to be pious while sneaking glances. The stone's cold, under your knees, and the incense is making you dizzy. But you're focused on the priest's words. Flee carnal lust, easy for him to say. Living in a monastery, but you're back in that crowded cottage with those bed curtains we talked about, where privacy's a dream and desire's a daily battle. The church says sex is for babies, but you're young, curious, and the miller's son has a smile that could melt iron. You're supposed to pray those feelings away, but they're stubborn, like a stain on your best kirtle. Step closer to the altar and notice the details. The carved wooden saints staring down, the faint hum of whispered prayers, the way the candlelight makes the air feel heavy. This church isn't just a place of worship. It's a courtroom where your every thought's on trial. You're thinking about confession, how you'll have to mumble something vague to avoid naming names. The church's rules cover everything when you can sleep with your husband not on Sundays or Lent. How missionary, please, and why kids? Not fun. It's exhausting. And you're wondering how anyone finds the energy after plowing fields or sewing by rushlight. Here's another chuckle. Ever wonder why medieval churches had such high ceilings? To give your sins room to echo before judgment. You're biting your lip to keep from giggling, because the matron next to you looks like she'd report you to the bishop. You're also thinking about loopholes. You've heard whispers village girls who sinned but married fast, or nobles who paid for pardons. The church's grip is tight, but it's not ironclad. You're starting to see cracks, places where desire slips through, like sunlight through those stained glass windows. As you shift on the pew, you're piecing together the bigger picture. The church isn't just about salvation, it's about control, shaping your bedroom as much as your soul. You're remembering that lumpy mattress, how it held both duty and secrets. The priest's voice is fading, but the rules linger, making you question every flutter in your chest. Yet, you're not alone. The woman beside you, the baker's wife, probably has her own confessions, and the Lord in the front pew isn't exactly a saint. You're all navigating this, some with prayers, others with sneaky plans. You're curious now, wondering how love and lust survived under this holy hammer. One last joke to ease us forward. Why did the medieval sermon drag on? Because the priest knew you were dreaming of the tavern. You're rising from the pew, the rosary tucked away. As the crowd shuffles out, the church's stone walls loom behind you, but you're carrying a spark of defiance, ready to see how medieval folks balanced duty and desire in the next chapter of their lives. You're stepping out of the church's heavy shadow, the incense still clinging to your wool dress, and into the bustling heart of a medieval village, where the air smells of fresh baked bread and manure. The market square's alive with hawkers shouting about turnips, and a blacksmith's hammer clanging nearby. You're a medieval woman, maybe 22, and your parents have just dropped a bombshell. You're betrothed to a man you barely know, maybe a merchant with a decent plot of land. Your life's about to revolve around marriage, a contract where love's a bonus, not the point, and the bedroom's more about duty than desire. You're navigating the medieval marriage game, where sex is a job, and you're wondering how to survive it without losing yourself, or tripping over your kirtle in the process. The mainstream fact is that marriage in medieval Europe was primarily a practical arrangement, especially from the 5th to 15th centuries. Canon law, backed by the church, made marriage a sacrament, but it was often about land, alliances, or survival, not romance. If you're a peasant, like most folks, you're marrying to share the workload, kids to plow fields, a spouse to mend nets. If you're noble, it's about securing a dynasty or a castle. Either way, sex is central, because babies seal the deal. You're expected to produce heirs, and fast, as laid out in texts like Gratian's Decretum 12th century, which stressed procreation over passion. You're eyeing your betrothed, let's call him Godwin, with his patchy beard and hoping he's at least kind, because you're stuck with him. But here's a quirky tidbit. Some couples used hand-fasting ceremonies, a sort of trial marriage where you'd clasp hands and pledge love publicly, sometimes living together before the priest got involved. In the 13th century, rural folks might hand-fast in a field, testing the waters. Bedroom included before committing. You're picturing yourself with Godwin, hands clasped under an oak, wondering if he snores or hogs the blanket. It's like a medieval Tinder date, but with more oxen and less swiping, and you're half tempted to try it, if only to delay the church bells. Historians still argue whether these marriages were loveless traps or if affection grew over time. Some, reading wills where husbands left sweet bequests to wives, say bonds formed through shared struggles. Others, citing court cases of runaway brides, argue many felt caged, especially when betrothed as teens. You're standing in this square, feeling the weight of Godwin's ring in your pocket, torn between duty and a flicker of hope that he might make you laugh. Time for a quick joke. Why did the medieval bride carry a loaf of bread? To bribe her groom into being nice. Seriously, you're clutching a basket of provisions, a dowry of sorts, and hoping it's enough to sweeten the deal. For now, you're dodging a muddy puddle, your mind racing with what's coming. Picture the scene. The market's chaotic, with pigs squealing, kids chasing a stray dog, and a minstrel strumming a lute for pennies. Your betrothal was sealed in a smoky hall, your father haggling with Godwin's over a few acres and a cow. You had little say medieval women rarely did, unless you were a wealthy widow. And even then, good luck. Sex is the unspoken clause. In this contract, you're supposed to share that straw mattress we peeked at, produce a son or 3, and keep Godwin happy, all while the church looms, reminding you to keep it holy. You've heard whispers from married friends, vague hints about duties and aches, but no one's spelling it out, and you're nervous, like you're heading into a joust without armor. Step closer to a market stall and notice the details. The rough burlap sacks of grain, the tang of overripe apples, the way your boots sink into the mud. This village is your world, and marriage is its glue, binding families, fields, and futures. You're thinking about that bed curtain, your only shield in a crowded cottage, and wondering how you'll manage with Godwin's family snoring nearby. The church says it's all for babies, but you're human, and the idea of desire, maybe even pleasure, keeps sneaking in, like a thief through a cracked window. You're curious, but also scared, because nobody's talking about what you want. Here's another chuckle. Ever wonder why medieval weddings had so much ale? To make the bedding part less terrifying, you're grinning, imagining a feast where you and Godwin get tipsy enough to fumble through it. You're also thinking about the stakes. If you don't produce kids, the village will gossip. Remember that church sermon about sin? Failure's a mark against you, and Godwin might grumble. If you're noble, it's worse, your lord might annul the match, leaving you shamed. You're starting to see marriage as a job, with sex as the shift you can't skip, and it's daunting as you weave through the crowd. You're piecing together the bigger picture. This betrothal isn't just about you and Godwin, it's about survival, tying you to the church's rules, the village's needs, the land's cycle. You're remembering that chamber, how it held both duty and secrets, and wondering if love could grow in its shadows. You've heard tales, couples who bicker but share quiet moments, or brides who run off with shepherds. You're not sure where you'll land, but you're clutching that ring, feeling its weight, and hoping for a spark amid the obligation. The market's noise fades as you head home, your future waiting like an unopened letter. One last joke to ease us forward. Why did the medieval groom look so nervous? Because the bride's dowry included her mother's advice. You're stepping away from the stall, the village buzzing behind you, carrying the promise and pressure of this marriage, ready to face what happens when the church bells ring and the bedroom door closes. You're standing in a dimly lit chamber, the one with the scratchy straw mattress and flickering rushlight. But now it's draped with rough linen garlands, and the air smells of ale and crushed herbs scattered for luck. It's your wedding night, and you're a medieval bride, maybe 19. Your heart thumping under a stiff new kirtle as Godwin, your new husband, fumbles with his tunic across the room. The village feast is over. There was mead, a fiddler, and too many toasts, and now you're alone, facing the awkward, often unprepared reality of what comes next. This isn't a candlelit romance. It's a medieval rite of passage, and you're navigating it with a mix of nerves, curiosity, and a prayer that Godwin's had less ale than his cousins. You're about to glimpse the truth of a bride's first night, where duty meets mystery, and you're hoping to survive the fleas and the fumbling. The mainstream fact is that medieval wedding nights were often shrouded in ignorance for brides, especially from the 5th to 15th centuries. The church, via canon law like the Decretum 12th century, insisted marriage was for procreation, but nobody taught you the details. You were expected to be pure. Virginity was non-negotiable, especially for nobles and reliant on your husband to lead. Village girls like you got vague warnings from mothers or aunts, maybe a nudge about lying still, while noble women might face a bedding ceremony, where guests escorted you to the chamber to ensure things got started. You're grateful. It's just you and Godwin, but the pressure's still crushing, like a millstone on your chest. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some couples used bridal posettes, warm, spiced drinks laced with wine or herbs, to calm nerves or spark desire. In the 14th century, recipes in household manuals called for cinnamon or saffron, believed to warm the blood. You're eyeing a clay mug on the table, steam rising, and wondering if it'll make Godwin less clumsy or just make you sleepy. It's like a medieval energy drink, but for courage, and you're half tempted to chug it, if only to stop your hands from shaking. Historians still argue whether wedding nights were traumatic or just awkwardly human, some, citing court records of annulments for non-consummation, say ignorance and fear made them rough, especially for young brides. Others, reading love poems or wills, suggest some couples found tenderness, even on night one. You're hoping for the latter, but as Godwin trips over his boots. You're not betting on poetry tonight. Time for a quick joke. Why did the medieval bride bring a candle? To see if her groom was worth the hype. You're smirking, clutching that rushlight, but its flicker isn't helping your nerves. For now, you're frozen. The bed curtains half drawn, waiting for Godwin to make a move. Picture the scene. The chamber's small, the straw mattress creaking under a thin blanket, and the garlands your mother's idea shedding petals on the floor. Godwin's not a bad sort, with his earnest eyes and calloused hands, but he's as clueless as you. Raised on the same church sermons we overheard. You're both playing parts in a script nobody explained, and the silence is louder than the feast's fiddler. You're remembering those market whispers, how marriage means babies, and the church's rules no fun, just duty. But you're human, and curiosity's creeping in, like a mouse through the thatch. What's it like? Will it hurt? Nobody told you about pleasure, but you're wondering if it's possible. Even in this drafty room, step closer to the bed and notice the details. The coarse weave of the linen, the faint whiff of sour ale on Godwin's breath, the way the rushlight casts his shadow like a giant. This isn't the cozy setup of those bed curtains we laughed about. It's a stage for a high-stakes performance. If you're noble, the Lord might demand proof of your virginity. Thankfully, you're just a villager, dodging that humiliation. But the village expects a baby by next harvest, and Godwin's family is counting on it. You're supposed to seal this marriage, make it official, and you're feeling the weight of every eye that toasted you today. Here's another chuckle. Ever wonder why medieval beds had so many blankets? To hide the bride's panic from the neighbors. You're pulling one over your shoulders, half laughing, half shivering, because this mattress is no feather bed. You're also thinking about what you know or don't. Maybe your sister giggled about moving with the rhythm, or a friend warned it's overquick. The church says it's for kids, not joy. But you're catching Godwin's shy glance, and there's a spark, maybe not love, but something human. You're both nervous, and that's oddly comforting, like you're in this together, fleas and all. As you sit on the bed's edge, you're starting to see the bigger picture. This night's not just about you and Godwin, it's about the village, the church, the future. You're remembering that sermon, how it painted desire as a trap, and the market's bustle, where marriage was a deal. Sex is your role now, a duty to fulfill, but you're wondering if there's room for more. A laugh, a touch, a moment that's yours. You've heard tales of couples who grow close, others who bicker, and you're hoping for the former. The posette's on the table, Godwin's inching closer, and you're bracing yourself, heart racing, for whatever this night holds. One last joke to ease us forward. Why did the medieval groom blush? Because the bed curtains knew his secrets first. You're blowing out the rushlight, the room darkening as Godwin mumbles something sweet. The garlands rustle overhead, and you're carrying a mix of fear and hope, ready to see how medieval folk lived with the weight of love and duty beyond this first, fumbling night. You're trudging through a muddy field, the damp earth sucking at your worn leather shoes, as the air smells of rain-soaked hay and distant wood smoke. It's dawn, and you're a medieval peasant woman, maybe 24, your hands rough from milking cows and your back aching from yesterday's harvest. You're not bound for a castle or a church today, you're living the gritty life of the common folk, where love and sex bloom in the cracks of endless toil. Forget the nobles with their velvet and vows. You're with the villagers, stealing moments of passion in barns or under starlit hedges, despite the church's rules and the village's watchful eyes. You're about to unearth how peasants like you found desire amid the dirt, and it's Messier and livelier than those sermons led on. The mainstream fact is that peasants, who made up most of medieval Europe's population from the 5th to 15th centuries, had more sexual freedom than nobles, but it came with risks. Unlike lords, sealed by dynastic marriages, you could often choose your partner, as long as your parents nodded and the manor lord didn't object. Court records, like those from 14th century England, show peasants marrying for love or convenience, and sex within or outside marriage was less policed, as long as it didn't disrupt the village's work. You're eyeing Wat, the shepherd, with a crooked grin, and wondering if a stolen kiss by the river's worth the gossip. Babies were welcome labor, but the church still loomed, demanding you save the fun for wedlock. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some villages had bundling customs, where betrothed couples could sleep together fully clothed to test compatibility before marriage. In 13th century rural areas, you'd share a bed with Wat, a plank between you to keep things proper. Though everyone knew planks weren't foolproof. You're imagining giggling under a blanket, Wat's breath warm, and hoping the plank doesn't creak too loudly. It's like a medieval sleepover with higher stakes, and you're half tempted to nudge that wood aside, if only to see what happens. Historians still argue whether this freedom was liberating or just a looser leash. Some, citing bawdy tales like the Miller's Tale from Chaucer, say peasants enjoyed a cheeky, earthy approach to sex, dodging the church's gloom. Others, reading fines for fornication in manor rolls, argue you faced harsh judgment if caught, especially if pregnancy messed up family plans. You're trudging along, feeling the mud and the possibility, wondering if Wat's grin is worth a scolding from the priest. Time for a quick joke. Why did the peasant lass hide in the hayloft? To steal a kiss without the cows tattling. You're smirking, brushing dirt from your skirt. But the field's no place for daydreams, you've got chores waiting. For now, you're stealing a glance at Wat, herding sheep across the hill. Picture the scene. The field's a patchwork of green and brown, with ox-drawn plows churning nearby and a raven cawing from a bare tree. Your life's tied to this. Land plant, reap, repeat, and love's a luxury, squeezed between milking and mending. You're not like that bride with her posset and garlands. Your wedding, if it happens, will be a quick vow in the churchyard, maybe a dance in the tavern. Sex is practical, babies. Mean hands for the harvest, but it's also human. You've heard giggles from the baker's wife about tumbling in the straw, and you're curious. Wat's not Godwin, bound by a merchant's deal. He's just a shepherd, and that makes him dangerous and thrilling. Step closer to the riverbank and notice the details. The cold water lapping it reeds, the faint bleat of sheep, the way your breath clouds in the chilly dawn. This field's your world, like that village market, but it's also a stage for stolen moments. The church says wait for marriage, like that sermon drilled into you. But village life's looser. You've seen couples slip off during festivals, or heard about hand-fasting pairs who didn't wait for the priest. Desire's everywhere in Wat's wink, in the songs sung at harvest feasts, but so's the risk. If you're caught, the village gossips will cluck, and the priest might demand a public penance, like standing in a white sheet at church. Here's another chuckle. Ever wonder why peasant cottages had such low doors? To keep the lovers from sneaking out to fast. You're grinning, but you're also wary your neighbor. Agnes got a tongue lashing for a romp with the miller, and you don't want her fate. You're thinking about that bed curtain, how it's a rare luxury in your one-room home, where your siblings sleep a few feet away. Sex with Wat, if it happens, might be in a barn or a field, quick and secret, with the stars as your only witness. It's not romantic, but it's alive. And that's enough to keep you dreaming as you pause by the river. You're starting to see the bigger picture. Peasant life's hard mud, hunger, taxes, but it's also raw, letting you chase desire in ways nobles can't. You're remembering that wedding night, its stiff duty, and contrasting it with the baker's wife's laughter. Love here isn't about alliances. It's about stolen glances, shared ale, maybe a life with what if the crops hold. The church's rules are real, but so's the village's pulse, and you're part of it, weaving through work and want. You're wondering if you'll dare meet Watt by the hedge tonight, or if caution and Agnes's shame will keep you home. One last joke to ease us forward. Why did the shepherd's crook bend? Because it saw too many secrets in the fields. You're turning back to the village, Watt's figure fading over the hill, carrying the spark of peasant passion and the weight of its risks, ready to see how others in this medieval world chased their own forbidden flames. You're slipping through the torchlit corridors of a stone castle, the air thick with the scent of beeswax and roasted venison from a feast still echoing in the great hall below. Your silk gown brushes the floor, and you're a medieval noblewoman, maybe 26, your heart racing as you steal toward a shadowed alcove. You're not here for prayer or needlework, you're meeting someone you shouldn't, a knight or perhaps a visiting lord, whose whispered words at the banquet set your pulse on fire. This is the dangerous world of noble affairs, where extramarital romance in medieval Europe was a high-stakes game of passion and peril. You're navigating a maze of honor, betrayal, and the ever-present threat of discovery, hoping your footsteps don't echo louder than your secrets. The mainstream fact is that adultery among medieval nobles, from the 5th to 15th centuries, was both common and catastrophic. The Church's canon law, reinforced by texts like the Summa Theologica 13th century, branded it a mortal sin, and secular laws could be brutal. Noble women caught cheating risked banishment, loss of dowry, or worse, depending on the Lord's temper. Yet, courtly life, with its feasts and tournaments, was a hotbed for flirtation. Chronicles like Froissart's 14th century describe lords and ladies sneaking off, driven by desire or politics. But for you, a dalliance with, let's call him, Sir Roland, could unravel your family's alliances, your marriage to Lord Godwin, and your whole world. You're clutching a velvet cloak, praying the servants don't notice your absence. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some noble women used love tokens, like embroidered ribbons or jeweled pins, to signal secret affection. In the 12th century, a lady might slip a knight a glove laced with her perfume, a coded invite to a private meeting. You're fingering a sapphire ring Roland gave you, hidden under your sleeve, its weight both thrilling and terrifying. It's like a medieval text message, but if Godwin finds it, you're not just grounded, you're ruined. You're half tempted to toss it into the moat, but Roland's dark eyes keep you holding on. Historians still argue whether these affairs were romantic rebellions or calculated power plays. Some, citing troubadour poetry, say they let women seize control in loveless marriages, wielding charm like a weapon. Others, reading trial records, argue they were traps, with women facing far harsher punishment than men. You're in that alcove now, Roland's whisper close, torn between the rush of his touch and the dread of a servant's eavesdropping, wondering if this is freedom or folly. Time for a quick joke. Why did the noblewoman hide her love token? Because her husband's sword was sharper than her wit. You're smirking, adjusting your cloak to muffle your heartbeat. But the castle's no place for laughs. Every shadow feels like a spy. For now, you're waiting, the alcove's chill seeping through your gown. Picture the scene. The corridors narrow, with damp stone walls and a tapestry of a hunt fluttering in the draught. The feast's music lute and some drunken singing fades below, but you're focused on Roland. His chainmail swapped for a soft tunic that smells of leather and cedar. You're not that peasant girl stealing kisses by the river. Your world's velvet and vellum, but it's just as dangerous. Adultery here isn't a village scandal, it's a political earthquake. If Godwin, your husband from that wedding night, catches you, he could lock you in a convent or worse. If Roland's lord finds out, it's a duel or banishment. And the church, it's ready to damn you both. Like that sermon warned, unless you buy an indulgence with enough gold. Step closer to the alcove and notice the details. The rough weave of the tapestry, the faint drip of water from a leaky roof, the way Roland's breath warms the air. This castle's your home, but it's also a cage, like that church with its rules or the village market's deals. You're thinking about that bed curtain, how even nobles used them for secrecy, but an alcove's riskier, with servants like medieval paparazzi lurking. Desires driving Roland's not Godwin, with his ale-soaked fumbles but so's defiance. Your marriage was a contract, not a choice. And Roland's attention feels like stealing back a piece of yourself. Sex, if it happens, is a leap. Pregnancies, a dead giveaway. And you've heard of herbs, but they're not foolproof. Here's another chuckle. Ever wonder why castle corridors were so dark? To hide the nobles' blushes from their own scandals. You're biting your lip, because Roland's hand grazes yours, and it's electric. But you're also terrified. You're remembering that peasants bundling, how it was freer but still risky, or the wedding night's duty. So unlike this spark, affairs are a noble's game, but the stakes are deadly. You've heard tales, ladies exiled, knights beheaded, marriages dissolved. If Godwin's spies like that nosy steward catch you're not just shamed, you're erased from the court. And Roland, he might walk away with a fine, because medieval justice loves a double standard. As you lean closer to Roland, you're starting to see the bigger picture. This affair isn't just about desire, it's about power, a way to defy the church's grip, Godwin's claim, the whole system that traded you like livestock. You're wondering about other noble women queens who took lovers, ladies who wrote poetry like that love token's promise. They're your silent allies, risking all for a moment of truth. The alcove's sheltering you, but it's temporary, and you're weighing every whisper against the life you could lose. The feast's music swells below, a reminder of the world waiting to judge you. But for now, Roland's here, and you're not ready to turn back. One last joke to ease us forward. Why did the noblewoman's cloak have so many folds? To hide her heart's reckless plans. You're pulling it tighter. Roland's shadow fading as you slip back toward the corridor, carrying the thrill of this secret and the weight of its danger. Ready to see how others in this medieval world dodge the consequences of their desires. You're crouched in the corner of a smoky village cottage, the air heavy with the scent of boiled cabbage and damp wool, as a fire sputters in the hearth. You're a medieval woman, maybe 25, married to Godwin and already weary from churning butter and chasing toddlers. Your hands fidget with a small pouch of dried herbs tucked under your apron, because you're not ready for another baby, not with the harvest lean and Godwin's temper short. You're diving into the secret world of medieval contraception, where women like you used cunning, whispers, and a bit of folklore to dodge pregnancy's heavy burden. This isn't about romance. It's about survival, and you're hoping these herbs don't taste as bad as they smell. The mainstream fact is that medieval women had limited but real methods to prevent pregnancy, despite the church's strict rules against it. From the 5th to 15th centuries, the church via texts like the Penitential of Theodore 7th century, condemned contraception as a sin, equating it with thwarting God's will. But village midwives and wise women passed down tricks, recorded in medical texts like the Trotula 12th century, which listed herbs, amulets, and timing tips. You're relying on a neighbor's advice: swallow parsley seeds or wear a weasel's foot talisman because childbirth's risky, and another mouth to feed could break you. The church might damn you, but you're more afraid of hunger than hellfire. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some women used pessaries, makeshift barriers, like wool soaked in rue or honey, inserted before sex to block conception. In the 13th century, recipes in herbal manuals described these as for women who wish to rest. You're picturing fumbling with a sticky wad of wool under those bed curtains we laughed about, hoping Godwin doesn't ask questions. It's like a medieval DIY project, and you're half laughing, half cringing, wondering if it'll work or just make a mess. Historians still argue whether these methods gave women control or just false hope. Some, citing the Trotula's detailed recipes, say they empowered you to manage your body in a world that demanded constant motherhood. Others, reading medical failures or church penalties, argue they were risky and unreliable, leaving you vulnerable to both pregnancy and punishment. You're clutching that herb pouch, feeling the stakes, wondering if this is defiance or desperation. Time for a quick joke. Why did the medieval wife hide her herbs? Because the priest had a nose for sin. You're smirking, tucking the pouch deeper. But the cottage is no place for carelessness. Godwin's due back from the fields. For now, you're stirring the pot, your mind on those seeds. Picture the scene. The cottage is cramped, with a dirt floor, a wobbly table, and a baby fussing in a cradle. The fire's smoke stings your eyes, but you're focused on the pouch. A gift from Agnes, the village midwife who knows more than she says. You're not that noblewoman sneaking off with Roland. Your world's mud and mending. Like that peasant field we trudged through. Pregnancy's a constant shadow. Childbirth kills 1 in 10 women. And you've seen graves to prove it. You love your kids, but 3's enough. And Godwin's not keen on resting like the Trotula suggests. These herbs are your secret. A way to carve out breathing room in a life that's all work. Step closer to the hearth and notice the details. The crackle of burning logs. The faint whiff of parsley from your pouch. The way the baby's snores blend with the wind outside. This cottage is your battleground, like that church with its sermons or the castle's risky alcoves. The church says babies are God's plan, but you're thinking of last winter, when the barley ran out. Contraception's not just about sex, it's about power, letting you decide when to risk your body. You've heard of other tricks: drinking tansy tea, avoiding certain days, or even charms whispered under the moon. They're not foolproof, and if the priest catches wind, you're facing a fine, or worse, a public shaming like Agnes endured. Here's another chuckle. Ever wonder why medieval women loved their gardens? Because the herbs kept more secrets than the priest. You're grinning, but you're also nervous. Godwin's boots are thumping outside, and you're not sure if he'd understand. You're thinking about that wedding night, how it was all duty, or the peasant's hayloft, where passion felt freer. Contraception's your version of freedom, but it's a quiet one, hidden under aprons and whispered in backyards. You've heard tales: women who overdid the herbs and got sick, or others who swore by a hare's bone amulet. You're hoping parsley's enough, because you can't afford a midwife's full kit. As you slip the pouch into a crack in the wall, you're starting to see the bigger picture. This isn't just about avoiding babies, it's about claiming a sliver of control in a world that gives you none. You're remembering that noblewoman's affair, how she risked everything for desire. Or the peasants bundling, a gamble for love. You're all dodging the same church, the same rules, just with different tools. Your herbs are your rebellion, like that love token or Watt's wink. And they tie you to every woman who whispered a secret to beat the system. The fire's dying down, Godwin's voice grumbling outside, and you're bracing for another night, hoping your pouch holds the key to a little more time. One last joke to ease us forward. Why did the medieval herb pouch smell so strong? Because it carried the wife's biggest dreams. You're banking the fire. The cottage darkening as Godwin stomps in. With the herbs hidden, you're carrying a quiet defiance, ready to see how medieval folk made sense of their bodies and desires in a world that tried to lock them up. You're hunched over a rickety table in a dimly lit village cottage, the air thick with the scent of tallow and dried herbs hanging from the rafters. A worn manuscript, borrowed from a traveling healer, lies open before you, its pages stained and curling. You're a medieval woman, maybe 27, married to Godwin and weary from juggling chores and kids. But tonight you're stealing a moment to unravel the mysteries of your own body. The church says desire's a sin, and Godwin's more practical than poetic. But this manuscript's whispering strange ideas about sex and health that make your head spin. You're diving into the bizarre world of medieval medical myths, where doctors and healers spun wild theories about bodies and passion. And you're trying not to laugh or cringe at the absurdity. The mainstream fact is that medieval medicine, from the 5th to 15th centuries, was a mix of ancient Greek theories, church doctrine, and local folklore, often misunderstanding human sexuality. Texts like the Trotula 12th century, attributed to a female healer, claimed women's bodies were cold and moist, needing male heat to function, with sex seen as a health necessity to balance your humor's blood, phlegm, and the rest. Doctors said too much desire could make you sick, but so could too little. And you're supposed to navigate this without blushing in confession. You're reading a line about womb suffocation, where your uterus supposedly wonders if you're not pregnant enough, and you're wondering if your aches are from chasing pigs or a rogue organ. Here's a quirky tidbit some healers prescribed. Love cures like eating leeks or wearing gemstones to tame unruly passions. In the 13th century, manuscripts suggested amethyst necklaces to cool lust, or onion broth to spark it if you were frigid. You're picturing Godwin slurping leek soup, hoping it'll make him less grumpy, and giggling at the thought of an amethyst curing your daydreams about Wat the shepherd. It's like a medieval smoothie cleanse, but for your soul, and you're half tempted to try the onions, if only for a laugh. Historians still argue whether these myths empowered women, or just confused them. Some, citing the Trotula's focus on female health, say they gave you knowledge to manage your body, even if it was shaky. Others, reading church records, argue they reinforced control, labeling your desires as diseases to be fixed. You're squinting at this manuscript, feeling both curious and skeptical, wondering if any of it makes sense or if you're just tired. Time for a quick joke. Why did the medieval healer carry so many herbs? To fix your heart and your wandering womb. You're chuckling, pushing the manuscript aside. But the cottage is no place for deep study. Godwin snoring in the corner. And the kids'll wake soon. For now, you're keeping the book hidden, like that herb pouch we tucked away. Picture the scene. The cottage is cramped, with a dirt floor, a smoky hearth, and a baby's cradle rocking gently. The manuscript's pages are brittle, inked with drawings of wombs that look more like turnips than anatomy. You're not that noblewoman with her risky affair, or the peasant lass stealing kisses. Your world's this smoky room, where sex is duty, babies, and maybe a flicker of want. These medical myths aren't just quirky, they're your guide. The closest thing to truth when midwives are scarce and priests are nosy. You're reading about excess seed causing hysteria if you don't release it, and it's making you rethink those late-night thoughts about what, wondering if they're a health risk or just human. Step closer to the hearth and notice the details. The warm flicker of the fire, the faint rustle of herbs overhead, the way the manuscripts ink smells like old secrets. This cottage is your classroom, like that church with its sermons or the field's stolen glances. But it's also a puzzle. The healers say sex keeps you balanced, but the church, with its rules we heard in that nave, says it's a sin unless it's for kids. You're caught in the middle, trying to square Godwin's needs with your own. And these myth swarms wandering, humors boiling aren't helping. You've heard of women dosed with sage tea for overlust, or sent to bleed leeches for melancholy. You're hoping you don't need either, because leeches give you the creeps. Here's another chuckle. Ever wonder why medieval doctors loved their potions? Because they thought your heart was brewing trouble. You're grinning, but you're also wary Godwin might wake. And explaining this book would be trickier than hiding that parsley pouch. You're thinking about that wedding night, all nerves and duty, or the noblewoman's alcove, where desire was a gamble. These myths tie you to them, making your body a mystery even to yourself. You've heard village tales, women blamed for barrenness because their cold wombs failed, or others shamed for wanting too much. You're wondering if the trotula's right, if your aches are humoral, or just life. As you close the manuscript, you're starting to see the bigger picture. These medical ideas aren't just wrong, they're a leash, like the church's rules, or the village's gossip, telling you what your body should be. But they're also a crack in the door, giving you words however weird for what you feel. You're remembering the contraception pouch, a secret rebellion, or the peasant's hayloft, where rules bent. You're all grappling with the same system, and this book, with its onion cures and wandering wombs, is your odd ally. The fire's dying, Godwin's snores growing louder, and you're tucking the manuscript under a floorboard, hoping its secrets spark more than just confusion. One last joke to ease us forward. Why did the medieval womb wander? Because it was tired of the church's lectures. You're banking the fire, the cottage darkening, as you slip toward the mattress. With the manuscript hidden, you're carrying a mix of doubt and daring, ready to see how medieval folk spun their own tales of love amid these tangled myths. You're perched on a cushioned bench in a castle's great hall, the air rich with the scent of spiced wine and burning logs, as a troubadour strums a lute and sings of knights pining for untouchable ladies. Your silk veil brushes your cheek, and you're a medieval noblewoman, maybe 28, married to Lord Godwin but caught in the spell of this poetic charade. The song's about courtly love, a game of chivalric devotion where knights worship ladies with flowery vows. But you're sensing a deeper pulse-real passion hiding behind the rhymes. You're diving into the world of courtly love, a medieval dance of words and glances that masked forbidden desire. And you're wondering if it's as pure as the troubadour claims, or as risky as that alcove tryst with Roland. The mainstream fact is that courtly love, flourishing from the 12th to 15th centuries, was a literary and social ideal in medieval Europe, especially among nobles. Poets like Chrétien de Troyes crafted tales, such as Lancelot, where knights served ladies with platonic adoration, swearing loyalty without expecting physical reward. It was a polished fantasy, endorsed by courts like Eleanor of Aquitaine, meant to refine rough knights and elevate women's status. But in practice, It flirted with danger. Your gaze lingers on a young knight, Sir Elaine, whose ode to your radiant virtue feels less like poetry and more like a dare. The church, with its sermons we heard, frowned on anything hinting at adultery, and Godwin's not blind. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some ladies gifted knights favors, like a ribbon or sleeve, to wear in tournaments as a public yet coded sign of affection. In the 13th century, these tokens could spark rumors, especially if the lady was married. You're fingering a green ribbon, wondering if you'd dare give it to Elaine. It's silk whispering secrets like that sapphire ring from Roland. It's like posting a cryptic Instagram story, knowing Godwin might see, and you're half thrilled, half terrified at the thought of it fluttering on Elaine's lance. Historians still argue whether courtly love was a harmless game or a cover for real affairs. Some, citing poetry's chaste tone, say it was symbolic, channeling desire into art to avoid sin. Others, reading chronicles of scandals, argue it fueled liaisons, with knights and ladies using service as an excuse for stolen moments. You're leaning toward the latter, Elaine's voice soft as he sings, and you're wondering if this is a performance or a prelude to something you can't uncouth. Time for a quick joke. Why did the troubadour sing so loudly? To drown out the lady's guilty blushes. You're smirking, fanning yourself with a feathered fan. But the hall's no place for careless grins. Godwin's at the high table, watching. For now, you're playing the part. Your veil a shield. Picture the scene. The hall's grand, with tapestries of unicorns and a long table littered with pewter goblets. The troubadour's lute weaves a spell, and knights in tunics lean closer to ladies, their laughter bright but brittle. You're not that peasant woman with her herb pouch, or the bride fumbling through her wedding night. Your world's one of velvet and intrigue, where words are weapons. Courtly love lets you wield them. Elaine's poem calls you his star, and you're supposed to smile demurely, but your pulse is racing. It's a game, but it's not. The church says desire's a sin, like that sermon preached, and Godwin's honor depends on your virtue. One wrong move, and you're not just a poet's muse, you're a scandal, like that noble woman in the alcove. Step closer to the fire and notice the details. The crackle of logs, the sweet tang of wine on your lips, the way Elaine's eyes catch yours across the hall. This space is your stage, like that church nave or the village field. But it's also a tightrope. Courtly love's rules say it's spiritual. Elaine's supposed to kneel, not touch, but the air's thick with possibility. You're thinking of that love token, how it could bind you closer, or that manuscript Smith's calling desire a health need. Sex with Elaine would be a leap, riskier than Roland's alcove, because courtly love makes it public, a story everyone's watching. Pregnancy's a betrayal Godwin couldn't ignore, and those herbs we hid aren't here. Here's another chuckle. Ever wonder why medieval ladies wore such long veils? To hide their hearts from nosy knights. You're adjusting yours, but it's no match for Elaine's stare. You're also thinking about the stakes. If you play this game to boldly say, gifting that ribbon servants will whisper, like those village gossips we overheard. If Godwin suspects, you're facing a convent or worse, while Elaine might just lose attorney slot. You've heard tales queens like Guinevere, fictional but cautionary, ruined by love's spotlight. Yet, the poetry's intoxicating, making you feel alive. Not just Godwin's wife or a baby dash maker. As you sip your wine, you're starting to see the bigger picture. Courtly love isn't just a song, it's a mask, letting you flirt with desire under the guise of art. You're remembering that peasant's hayloft, raw and free, or the noblewoman's affair, all risk and no rules. You're all chasing the same spark, dodging the same church, just in different costumes. Elaine's song ends, the hall clapping, and you're weighing your next move. Smile, ignore, or slip him that ribbon. The fire's warmth is fading, Godwin's gaze heavy, and you're holding the ribbon. It's silk, a question you're not sure you're ready to answer. One last joke to ease us forward. Why did the knight's poem rhyme so well? Because his heart was tripping over her veil. You're rising, the troubadour striking up another tune, as you glide toward the shadows, with Elaine's voice lingering. You're carrying the thrill of this charade and its hidden truths, ready to see how medieval folk navigated darker corners of desire. You're weaving through the muddy, torchlit streets of a medieval town, the air sharp with the stench of tanneries and the faint sweetness of spilled ale. From a nearby tavern, your cloak's hood is pulled low, and you're a medieval woman, maybe 30, stepping carefully to avoid puddles and prying eyes. You're not here for market or mass, you're brushing past the shadowy world of prostitution, where sex is a trade, judged by the church but woven into the fabric of town life. This isn't the noble's alcove or the peasant's hayloft. It's a gritty reality where women sell what others hide, and you're catching glimpses of their lives, wondering how they connect to your own. You're navigating these streets, heart thudding, to uncover the truths of this forbidden trade. The mainstream fact is that prostitution was widespread in medieval Europe from the 5th to 15th centuries. Despite the church's condemnation, canon law, like the Decretum 12th century, branded it a sin, but towns often regulated it, setting up stews or licensed brothels to keep order. Records from 14th century London show thousands of women worked as prostitutes, many driven by poverty, servants, widows, or girls with no dowry. You're passing a woman in a gaudy kirtle, her laugh bold but brittle, and you're realizing she might be your neighbor's sister, fallen on hard times. The church damns her, but the town's men, maybe even Godwin, slip through these alleys, and you're wondering where the sin really lies. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some towns marked prostitutes with special clothes, like yellow hoods or striped cloaks, to set them apart. In 13th century France, a harlot might wear a red cord on her sleeve, a badge of shame that doubled as advertising. You're picturing that woman's bright kirtle, wondering if it's her choice or the town's rule, and grinning at the irony. It's like a medieval billboard, shouting what the church wants hushed. You're tugging your own cloak tighter, hoping no one mistakes you for her, because gossip travels faster than a horse in these streets. Historians still argue whether prostitution offered women agency or just trapped them. Some, citing brothel regulations, say it gave a few especially high-end courtesans money and influence, outshining your peasant herb pouch's quiet rebellion. Others, reading court records of violence or disease, argue it was a desperate last resort, with women facing brutal risks for little gain. You're watching that woman vanish into an alley, torn between pity and awe, wondering if she's freer than you or just caged differently. Time for a quick joke. Why did the medieval prostitute wear such bright colors? To outshine the priest's gloomy sermons. You're smirking, but the street's no place for laughs. Torches flicker, and a drunk stumbles too close. For now, you're keeping to the shadows, your cloak a shield against curious glances. Picture the scene. The street's narrow, lined with crooked timber houses, their shutters half open to let out laughter or moans. A dog barks, and a man in a hood, maybe a merchant, slips into a doorway. You're not that noblewoman with her courtly love songs or the village wife with her parsley seeds. Your world's somewhere in between, but these streets touch it. Prostitution's not just their life, it's yours too. That maid who left your service last year, she might be here, driven by a bad winter, Godwin, your husband from that wedding night, might know these alleys, seeking what you're too virtuous to give. The church's rules, those sermons we heard, say purity's your job, but men walk free, and you're feeling the weight of that double standard. Step closer to a tavern and notice the details. The sticky cobblestones underfoot, the sour tang, a veil in the air, the way a woman's voice calls from a window, half teasing, half tired. This street's a far cry from the castle's tapestries or the cottage's hearth, but it's part of the same medieval world, like that bed curtain hiding secrets. You're thinking about risks. These women faced disease. Syphilis was a slow killer by the 15th century, and violence from clients or constables. Pregnancy's a problem too. Those herbs we hid might be their tools, but with no guarantee. You're wondering how they survive, if they laugh like you do with friends, or if the curdle's brightness is all they've got left. Here's another chuckle. Ever wonder why medieval taverns were so loud? To drown out the church's judgment of everyone inside. You're biting your lip, because that woman's laugh from the alley sounded real, and it's making you question everything. You're also thinking about connections. That noblewoman's affair, with its love tokens, flirted with ruin. These women live it daily, trading desire for coin. The peasants bundling, the bride's posset, they're all dodging the same church, just with different stakes. You're realizing your own secrets, that manuscript smiths. The herb pouch aren't so far from this world. You're all navigating the same rules, just wearing different CLOAKs. As you turn a corner, you're starting to see the bigger picture. Prostitution's not just a shadow, it's a mirror, showing the cracks in the church's purity myth, the marriage deals, the medical nonsense about your body. You're wondering about that woman. Does she have a name like Clara, a locket like Eliz's, a dream like yours? She's your neighbor, your shadow, and her life's tied to yours. Whether you admit it or not, the street's growing quieter, the torch is dimming, and you're slipping back towards safer paths. But her laugh lingers, a reminder of the desires everyone's hiding, saint or sinner. One last joke to ease us forward. Why did the prostitute's cloak have patches? Because it carried the town's secrets too. You're pulling your hood lower, the tavern's noise fading as you head home. With the street behind you, you're carrying a new lens on this medieval world, ready to uncover what other hidden loves slipped through its cracks. You're tucked into a quiet corner of a castle library, the air heavy with the scent of vellum and dust, as a single candle casts a golden glow over shelves of manuscripts. You're a medieval noblewoman, maybe 32, your silk gown pulling on the floor as you trace a finger over a faded page, a poem hinting at forbidden love, not between knight and lady, but between two women. The words are veiled, cloaked in metaphors of roses and moonlight, but they stir something in you, a memory of a friend's lingering touch at a feast. You're diving into the hidden world of same-sex love in medieval times, where queer whispers bloomed in the shadows of the church's rules and society's expectations. This is a secret history, delicate and dangerous, and you're piecing it together with a mix of awe and caution. The mainstream fact is that same-sex relationships, though rarely documented, existed in medieval Europe from the 5th to 15th centuries, often obscured by the church's condemnation. Theological texts, like Peter Damian's Book of Gomorrah, 11th century, railed against sodomy, lumping all non-procreative acts into sin. But women's relationships flew under the radar more than men's, because the church saw women as less lustful. Your close friendships, shared beds, fervent letters were often dismissed as innocent. You're thinking of a lady-in-waiting, let's call her Beatrice, whose smile at the last tourney felt more than sisterly. and wondering if this poem's for someone like her, hidden in plain sight. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some women exchanged sisterhood vows, quasi-religious pledges of devotion that mimicked marriage. In 12th century convents or courts, you might swear eternal loyalty to a friend, trading rings or prayers, with no one batting an eye. You're imagining clasping Beatrice's hand in a chapel, a silver ring cool against your skin. Its meaning, yours alone. It's like that noble woman's love token, but softer, a secret woven into the church's own rituals. And you're half smiling at the thought of outsmarting the priests. Historians still argue whether these bonds were platonic or physical. Some, citing poems like those of Hadowich, a 13th century mystic, say they were deeply romantic, even erotic, cloaked in spiritual language. Others, reading church records, argue physical acts were rare, with women's love staying emotional to avoid detection. You're turning the manuscript's page, Beatrice's face in your mind, torn between hope and fear of what crossing that line might mean. Time for a quick joke. Why did the medieval lady hide her poem? Because it rhymed with secrets the priest couldn't hear. You're chuckling, the candle flickering. But the library's no place for carelessness servants might sweep through. And Godwin's steward has sharp ears. For now, you're alone, lost in this fragile verse. Picture the scene. The library's small, its oak shelves crammed with scrolls and codices, a cold draft sneaking through the shutters. You're not that peasant woman with her herb pouch or the town walker brushing past prostitutes. Your world's one of parchment and privilege, but desire's just as risky. This poem, with its talk of twin souls and secret gardens, feels like a mirror Beatrice's hand grazed yours when you shared a psalter. And you've replayed it for days. The church, with its sermons we heard, calls this sin. But it's vague about women, and that's your shield. You're wondering if Beatrice feels it too. If her letters tucked in your locked chest hold the same coded heat as Clara's did in another life. Step closer to the candle and notice the details. The wax pooling on the table, the faint scratch of a quill left by some monk, the way the poem's ink gleams like a whisper. This library's your haven, like that castle alcove or the village field, but it's also a tightrope. Same-sex love's a ghost here, nobody names it, but it's there, in convent hymns, courtly glances, or this manuscript's metaphors. You're thinking of that courtly love song, how it masked desire, or the prostitute's kirtle, shouting what you hide. Sex with Beatrice, if it happened, would be a leap, no pregnancy to betray you, but gossip could ruin you both. You're careful, your diary locked like that chest, because even whispers carry weight. Here's another chuckle. Ever wonder why medieval libraries were so dark? To keep forbidden loves lit only by candles. You're biting your lip, because Beatrice's laugh at the feast felt like a spark, and this poem's fanning it. You're also thinking about risks. If Godwin's steward caught you exchanging rings, or if a priest read this poem's truth, you'd face penance, maybe a convent, like that noble woman's fate. Beatrice might lose her place at court. You've heard tales nuns disciplined for special friendships, or ladies sent to cloisters for scandal. But you've also heard of women who lived quietly, their vows unspoken, their loves tucked into psalters or poems. As you close the manuscript, you're starting to see the bigger picture. Queer love wasn't just a secret, it was a defiance. Slipping through the church's rules, the marriage deals, the medical myths we laughed at. You're remembering that peasants bundling, the noblewoman's affair, the prostitute's laugh, they're all tied to you, chasing desire in a world that said no. This poem's your locket, your herb pouch, a way to hold Beatrice close without breaking the silence. You're wondering if she'd meet you here, if you'd dare speak first. The candle's burning low, the library's hush deepening, and you're tucking the poem away. Its words a quiet promise you're not ready to break. One last joke to ease you as forward. Why did the medieval poem stay unfinished? Because its love was too bold for the page. You're blowing out the candle, the room darkening as you slip toward the door. With Beatrice's smile lingering, you're carrying this hidden spark, ready to see how others in this medieval world wrestled with desires they couldn't name. You're lying on a straw pallet in your village cottage, the air thick with the scent of wood smoke and the damp wool of your blanket. The fire's down to embers, casting faint shadows on the dirt floor, and you're a medieval woman, maybe 29, married to Godwin. Your body feels heavy, not just from hauling water or kneading dough, but from the new weight in your womb. You're pregnant, a truth confirmed by the midwife's knowing nod. The world expects you to be joyful, a vessel for the next generation, but you're staring at the rafters, heart pounding with the fear and burden of childbirth. You're diving into the medieval reality of pregnancy, where joy and danger are twined like ivy. And you're bracing for a journey that could end in a cradle or a grave. The mainstream fact is that pregnancy and childbirth were central to medieval women's lives, but fraught with peril from the 5th to 15th centuries. Church doctrine, echoed in texts like the Summa Theologica 13th century, saw motherhood as your divine role, tying you to Eve's legacy of pain and redemption. But the risks were stark. About 10 to 20% of women died in childbirth from infection, hemorrhage, or exhaustion. As village records show, you're expected to bear multiple children to work the fields or secure Godwin's lineage. But each labor's a gamble, and you're clutching that blanket, thinking of the neighbor who didn't survive her last. The village needs your baby, but you're praying to survive the ordeal. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some women wore birth girdles, parchment strips inscribed with prayers or saints' names, tied around the belly for protection. In the 14th century, these were loaned out by churches, like a medieval talisman for safe delivery. You're imagining wrapping one around you, its ink smudged from other mothers' hopes, and grinning at the thought of a saint guarding your womb better than that herb pouch we hid. It's like a holy seatbelt, and you're half tempted to beg the priest for one, fleas and all. Historians still argue whether pregnancy gave women status or just chained them to suffering. Some, citing wills where mothers were honored, say it elevated your role, tying you to the village's future. Others, reading medical texts or grave markers, argue it was a brutal expectation, with little care for your survival. You're rubbing your belly, feeling the first flutters, torn between pride and dread, wondering if you'll hold this child or join the churchyard's silent ranks. Time for a quick joke. Why did the medieval mother knit so fast to finish the baby's blanket before the saints called her home? You're chuckling, but it's shaky. The palais's no comfort, and Godwin's snoring doesn't help. For now, you're alone with your thoughts. The fire's glow your only companion. Picture the scene. The cottage is small, with a cradle in the corner empty for now and a pot of cooling pottage by the hearth. You're not that noblewoman with her secret poems or the town walker in her bright kirtle. Your world's this smoky room, where pregnancy's both your duty and your danger. The midwife, Agnes, was blunt. Rest, pray, and hope. But rest's a dream when there's bread to bake, and prayer feels thin against the stories you've heard. Women screaming for days, babies born still, or mothers fading from fever. You're thinking of that contraception pouch, wishing you'd used it one more time. But it's too late now, and Godwin's counting on a son. Step closer to the fire and notice. The details. The faint crackle of embers, the rough weave of the blanket, the way your breath catches as the baby shifts. This cottage is your cocoon, like that library's hush or the field's muddy freedom. But it's also a crucible. The church, with its sermons we heard, says this is your purpose, but it's silent on the pain. You're supposed to trust God, maybe Saint Margaret, patron of childbirth, but you're practical. You want Agnes's herbs, not just her prayers. Childbirth's a battle, with no doctor, just a midwife's hands and a bucket of hot water. If you're lucky, it's quick. If not, you're facing days of agony, and the village will bury you with pity. Here's another chuckle. Ever wonder why medieval cradles rocked so hard? To lull the baby and the mother's fears. You're smiling, but it's fleeting, because you're remembering the graveyard, its fresh mounds for mothers and babes. You're also thinking about ties to others. That noble woman's a fair risk to her honor, but you're risking your life. The prostitute's kirtle hid her struggles, like your blanket hides your fear. Even that love poem, with its coated roses, feels distant but kin. You're all carrying burdens, just in different shapes. You've heard of noble women with physicians, or nuns praying through labor, but you've got Agnes, and that's enough. Or so you hope, as you shift on the pallet. You're starting to see the bigger picture. Pregnancy's not just a baby, it's a thread in the medieval tapestry, tying you to the church's rules, the village's survival, the family's hopes. You're remembering that wedding night's duty, the peasant's stolen kisses, the medical myths about your womb. They're all part of this, pushing you toward motherhood while the risks loom. You're wondering about other women, how many prayed like you, how many survived to sing to their babes. The fire's nearly out, Godwin snores steady, and you're whispering a prayer, not just for the child, but for yourself, hoping to see the dawn after the delivery. One last joke to ease us forward. Why did the medieval mother's candle burn low? Because it knew her strength would outshine it. You're pulling the blanket higher, the cottage dark and still, as you close your eyes. With the baby's weight anchoring you, you're carrying hope and fear, ready to see how others in this medieval world faced their own trials of desire and duty. You're cloistered in the dim stone walls of a medieval monastery, the air cool and heavy with the scent of damp earth and beeswax from flickering candles. You're a nun, maybe 23. Your rough wool habit scratching your skin as you kneel in a small chapel, the faint chant of vespers echoing nearby. The world outside village fields, castle feasts feels distant, but your vows of chastity, poverty, and obedience don't silence the human stirrings in your heart. You're diving into the hidden struggles of monastic life, where monks and nuns like you grappled with forbidden desires under the church's unyielding gaze. This is a world of silence and secrets, and you're wrestling with thoughts that could unravel your sacred promises, all while the crucifix above seems to watch. The mainstream fact is that medieval monastic vows of chastity, enforced from the 5th to 15th centuries, demanded total abstinence from sex and desire, as outlined in rules like the Rule of Saint Benedict 6th century. The church saw monks and nuns as spiritual warriors, their purity a shield against sin, and any lapse was a betrayal of God. Convent and monastery records, like those from 13th century England, show strict measures separate quarters, constant prayer to keep temptation at bay. But you're human, and the memory of a young scribe's smile during last week's manuscript copying has you questioning. Your rosary beads clicking faster as you pray the feeling away. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some nuns wore chastity belts of knotted cords, called singula, to symbolize their vows and deter stray thoughts. In the 12th century, These were blessed by abbesses, a physical reminder of your promise. You're fingering the coarse cord at your waist. It's knots digging in, and grinning at the thought of it fending off that scribe. Let's call him brother Thomas. Like a magical fence. It's like a medieval Fitbit for virtue, and you're half laughing, half wincing, wondering if it's working or just making you itch. Historians still argue whether monastic chastity was a spiritual triumph or a constant battle. Some, citing hagiographies of saintly nuns, say vows freed you from worldly desires, channeling love into faith. Others, reading disciplinary records of lapses, argue desire persisted, with some monks and nuns forming secret bonds. You're kneeling here, Thomas's face lingering, torn between your soul's vow and your heart's whisper, wondering if you're alone in this struggle. Time for a quick joke. Why did the nun's rosary break? Because it couldn't handle her wandering thoughts. You're smirking, but the chapel's no place for giggles. The abbess's footsteps echo nearby. For now, you're bowing your head. The candles glow your only warmth. Picture the scene. The chapel's stark, with a stone altar, a wooden crucifix, and a faint draft sneaking through the walls. You're not that pregnant villager fearing childbirth, or the noblewoman weaving courtly love. Your world's one of prayer and parchment, but desires no less real. The church, with its sermons we heard, demands you be an angel, not a woman. But Thomas's quiet laugh when you smudged ink feels more sacred than this chant. Vows are your shield, but they're also your cage, locking away the life you left. Maybe a betrothal like that Market Square deal, or a crush like Watts Wink. Sex is forbidden, but thoughts creep in, and you're praying they don't show on your face during confession. Step closer to the altar and notice the details. The cold stone under your knees, the faint hum of the nuns' voices, the way the candlelight dances on the crucifix. This chapel's your refuge, like that library's poetry or the cottage's herb pouch. But it's also a test. The church says desire's a sin, like that prostitution street's curdles or the noblewoman's affair. But it's vague about thoughts. You've heard whispers nuns disciplined for particular friendships, monks sent to penance for stolen glances. You're thinking of that poem about twin souls, how it felt like your secret, or the contraception herbs. Another, rebellion. Thomas isn't a lover, not yet, but his presence is a crack in your armor, and you're scared it'll widen. Here's another chuckle. Ever wonder why monastic candles burned so dim? Because they knew the vows were hard to keep. You're biting your lip because the abbess's shadow just passed, and you're not sure if she saw your flush. You're also thinking about risks. If you and Thomas grew close, shared a touch, a letter, it could mean expulsion, public shame, or worse, like the tales of nuns walled up for sins. You're careful. Your prayers fervent, but you're human, and the monastery's no vacuum. You've seen monks linger at the scriptorium, nuns exchange coded smiles. Desire's here, quiet but stubborn, like a weed in the cloister garden. As you rise from your knees, you're starting to see the bigger picture. Monastic vows aren't just about God, they're about control. Like the church's grip on that wedding night or the village's gossip. You're remembering the peasant's hayloft, the noblewoman's ribbon, the prostitute's laugh. They're all fighting the same rules, just in different cloaks. Your struggle's quieter, but it's real, tying you to every woman who felt a forbidden spark. Thomas's smile is your locket, your secret, and you're not sure if you'll chase it or bury it. The vespers fade, the chapel's hush deepening, and you're slipping toward your cell. The cord at your waist a reminder of the battle you're still fighting. One last joke to ease us forward. Why did the nun's habit feel so heavy? Because it carried her heart's secret prayers. You're dousing the candle, the chapel darkening as you glide toward the door, with Thomas's face fading. You're carrying this fragile defiance, ready to see how medieval folk faced the consequences of breaking their world's sacred rules. You're standing in the muddy churchyard of your village, the air sharp with the scent of wet grass and the faint tang of incense drifting from the open church door. A crowd murmurs around you, their breath clouding in the chilly dawn, as a woman in a white sheet stands before the priest, her head bowed in shame. You're a medieval woman, maybe 31, clutching your cloak, your heart thudding with a mix of pity and fear. She's been caught, maybe a tryst like your daydreams of what, or a slip like that noblewoman's alcove, and now she's paying the price. You're diving into the harsh world of punishments for sexual transgressions in medieval times, where the church and community enforced their rules with public disgrace, fines, or worse. This is the cost of desire, and you're feeling its weight like a stone in your chest. The mainstream fact is that medieval Europe, from the 5th to 15th centuries, had a rigid system for punishing sexual sins, enforced by both church and secular courts. Ecclesiastical laws, like those in the penitential of Bede 8th century, prescribed penalties for adultery, fornication, or unnatural acts, ranging from public penance to excommunication. Secular courts added fines, whippings, or banishment, especially for women. As village records from 14th century England show, you're watching this woman, let's call her Marjorie, stand in her sheet, sentenced for lying with a tanner, and you're wondering if her lover's here, or if he's escaped with a lighter fine. The church's rules, those sermons we heard, demand purity, and Marjorie's the warning for you all. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some villages used shame masks, iron cages worn on the head, to humiliate sinners during public penance. In the 13th century, a woman caught in adultery might parade through town, the mask clanking, while kids threw mud. You're picturing Marjorie spared this, her sheet bad enough, and grinning nervously at the thought of that clunky mask. It's like a medieval dunce cap, but scarier. You're tugging your cloak tighter, hoping you'll never face that crowd, because even a whisper of what could land you here. Historians still argue whether these punishments deterred sin, or just ruined lives. Some, citing court rolls, say they kept communities in line, reinforcing the church's grip we felt in that nave. Others, reading defiant love letters or repeat offenders' names, argue they sparked rebellion, with folks risking all for desire. You're watching Marjorie's trembling hands, torn between fear of this fate and a stubborn spark that says love's worth it, wondering if you'd be as brave or as broken. Time for a quick joke. Why did the medieval sinner wear a sheet? To hide her blush from the village's stares. You're smirking, but the churchyard's no place for laughs. The priest's glare is sharp, and the crowd's whispers sting. For now, you're blending in, your cloak a shield against suspicion. Picture the scene. The churchyard's packed, with villagers in rough tunics and a few merchants in finer wool, all eyeing Marjorie like she's a cautionary tale. The church looms, its stone cross stark against the gray sky, and the priest's voice drones about repentance. You're not that nun wrestling with vows or the noblewoman flirting with courtly love. Your world's this muddy village, where sex and sin are everybody's business. Marjorie's crime, a tumble with the tanner, isn't so far from your own thoughts, those stolen glances at what we kept secret. The church says it's damnation, like that sermon preached, but the village's judgment hits harder. Marjorie's name's mud now, her family shunned, her future grim. Step closer to the church door and notice the details. The cold earth under your shoes, The faint clink of coins as a fine's collected, the way Marjorie's sheet flutters in the wind. This churchyard's a courtroom, like that monastery's chapel or the castle's hall, but it's public. Raw punishments aren't just about sin, they're about control, keeping you in line with that marriage deal, those herb pouch risks, the fear of childbirth we felt. You're thinking of others, the prostitute's kirtle, marked like Marjorie's sheet, or the nun's knotted cord, a private penance. If you acted on what, you'd be here, or worse, noble women faced convents, peasants got whippings, and sodomites risked burning, though women were rarely named. Here's another chuckle. Ever wonder why medieval crowds loved a penance? Because it was better gossip than the tavern. You're biting your lip, because Marjorie's tears are real, and you're imagining yourself in her place. The village's eyes like daggers. You're also thinking about stakes. If you're caught, it's not just shame. Fines could bankrupt your family, or banishment could send you to those town streets we walked. Men like the tanner often paid less, slipping back to work, while women carried the stain. You're remembering that alcove's thrill, the poem's coded love, the peasant's hayloft. All risks with this endgame. Your secrets, locked in that diary we haven't named, feel heavier now as the priest dismisses Marjorie. You're starting to see the bigger picture. These punishments aren't just about her, they're a warning, tying you to the church's rules, the village's order, the fear that kept desire in check. You're wondering about others, how many stood like Marjorie, how many hid their sins better. You're thinking of that contraception pouch, a quieter defiance, or the nun's fleeting smile, a softer sin. You're all bound by this system, punished for wanting what makes you human. The crowd's dispersing, Marjorie's sheet trailing in the mud, and you're slipping away, her shame a mirror you're not ready to face. One last joke to ease us forward. Why did the medieval priest scowl so much? Because sinners kept giving him job security. You're pulling your cloak close, the churchyard emptying, as you head home, with Marjorie's image lingering. You're carrying a sharpened fear and a stubborn spark, ready to see how medieval love left its mark on the world beyond these punishments. You're sitting by the hearth in your village cottage, the fire's glow casting soft shadows on the rough walls, the air warm with the scent of wood smoke and the faint must of dried herbs. Tucked in the rafters, you're a medieval woman, maybe 34, your hands resting on that worn diary we've kept hidden, its pages filled with whispers of Wat's smile, Godwin's duties, and the fears of that churchyard penance. The world outside fields, castles, churches feels distant tonight, and you're reflecting on the legacy of medieval love, how the desires, rebellions, and struggles of women like you wove threads that still touch the world today. This is the final tapestry, a chance to see how your heart's quiet battles shaped romance's future. And you're ready to let it unfold, gentle as the embers hum. The mainstream fact is that medieval attitudes toward sex and love, from the 5th to 15th centuries, laid roots for modern romance, despite the church's iron grip. The struggles you've faced, marriage deals, secret herbs, forbidden sparks sparked changes that echoed forward. By the late Middle Ages, as seen in texts like the Book of Marjorie Kemp 15th century, women's voices began to challenge norms, demanding love as partnership, not just duty. Your defiance, whether in that hayloft or that poem's coded roses, helped shift the world toward seeing desire as human, not sinful. You're thinking of Marjorie's shame, the nun's vows, the prostitute's laugh. They're all part of this, pushing against rules to carve space for feeling. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some medieval women left love knots, braided cords, or carved trinkets as tokens for future generations, often buried in dowry chests. In the 14th century, these were keepsakes, not just of romance but of resilience, passed to daughters with whispered stories. You're imagining slipping a knotted cord into your diary, tied with thoughts of Beatrice's touch or Watt's wink, for some far-off girl to find. It's like that sisterhood vow, a secret gift across time, and you're smiling at the thought of your life speaking to hers, long after the fire's gone cold. Historians still argue whether medieval love's legacy was transformative or overstated, some citing the rise of romantic literature like Tristan and Isolde. Say your quiet rebellions, courtly love, queer whispers. Peasant passions reshaped how love was dreamed and lived. Others, reading persistent church laws, argued change was slow, with women's desires still caged for centuries. You're holding that diary, feeling its weight, leaning toward the former. Every hidden herb, every stolen glance, feels like a stone in a river, shifting its course, even if you can't see the sea. Time for a quick joke. Why did the medieval diary stay locked? Because its love outlasted the church's frowns. You're chuckling softly, the fire's crackle blending with your breath, because this moment's yours, a pause before the night claims you. For now, you're alone. The cottage a cocoon of memory. Picture the scene. The hearth's embers pulse. The cradle in the corner still. Your children asleep. Godwin out with the plow. You're not that noblewoman with her troubadour, or the nun, wrestling with Thomas's smile. You're here, in this smoky heart of your world, where love was duty, risk, and everything in between. You're thinking of that wedding night's nerves, the contraception pouch's defiance, the churchyard's shame. They're all threads in a larger weave. Medieval love wasn't just beds and babies. It was power, fought for in alcoves, fields, and silent prayers. You're wondering about others, the peasants bundling, the prostitutes' kirtle, the nuns' cord, how their sparks lit paths to a world where love could be freer, where desire didn't need a priest's nod. Step closer to the fire and notice the details, the warm flicker on your hands, the faint creak of the cottage settling, the way the diary's leather feels like a friend. This hearth's your final stage, like that library's manuscripts or the market's bustle. But it's also a bridge. You're seeing how your choice is hiding that pouch, dreaming of what surviving childbirth helped bend the rules. The church's grip, those medical myths, the punishments we saw they couldn't snuff out desire. You're thinking of later. Women, maybe in Renaissance gowns or modern dresses, who loved boldly because you dared to feel. Your legacies in their laughter, their letters, their lives unchained from Godwin's world. Here's another chuckle. Why did the medieval fire burn so long? Because it carried love's warmth to tomorrow. You're smiling, but it's tender, because this journey's ending. You're carrying every woman we've met, the bride's posset, the noblewoman's ribbon, the nun's secret hand. Their loves, forbidden or free, are yours. You're not rewriting history, but you're part of it, a knot in the cord that stretches forward. The diary's closed, the fire's low, and you're ready to rest. Your heart full of their courage and yours. Now, let's ease into the quiet. Let the world soften around you. You're still by that hearth, the embers fading to a gentle red, their warmth a whisper against your skin. The cottage melts away, the diary resting light in your hands, its secret safe, tucked into the night's embrace. You're breathing slower, the wood smoke scent blending with the calm of a starlit field, where Watt's smile, Beatrice's touch, and Marjorie's strength linger like fireflies. You don't need to fight anymore. You've carried their loves, their defiance, through villages and castles. And that's enough. Picture a river, like the one by your field, its ripples carrying your story forward, joining countless others in a timeless flow. The church's rules, the village's eyes, they're fading, leaving only the warmth of human hearts. Let the fire dim, let the shadows cradle you. Your eyes are heavy, your soul at peace, and the night's ready to hold you close. Sleep now, sweet listener, and dream of love's quiet victories, glowing softly in the dark.